April 3, 1943. The rolling hills outside Castellammare, Sicily, lay bathed in early morning sunlight as Staff Sergeant Joseph Franklin adjusted his position atop the stone farmhouse. Through his scope, German snipers were setting up positions nearly 900 yards away, well beyond the effective range of standard American rifles. Franklin smiled confidently, believing his modification would change everything in the coming hours. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the remarkable account of how one man's agricultural background would transform long-range combat techniques and save countless American lives through a simple innovation that the military's finest engineers had overlooked. The sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty fields of Tuskegee, Alabama, in the summer of 1937. Joseph Franklin wiped sweat from his brow as he made a final adjustment to the irrigation system he had devised for his family's struggling 20-acre farm. At 32 years old, Joseph had become known throughout Macon County for his uncanny ability to repair, modify, and improve nearly any piece of equipment with whatever materials he had at hand. "That should hold it now," Joseph murmured to himself, tightening a piece of copper wire that stabilized a joint in the pipe network. The simple addition had stopped the vibration that had been causing leaks throughout the system for months. His father, William Franklin, watched from beneath the shade of a nearby oak tree. "You and your wires," William said, with a mixture of pride and amusement. "Seems like you can fix just about anything with a few cents worth of metal." Joseph straightened up, his 6'3" frame casting a long shadow across the freshly watered soil. "It ain't about how much something costs, Pop. It's about understanding how things work together. This whole system was shaking itself apart until I figured out where to place the stabilizer." This intuitive understanding of mechanical systems had served Joseph well throughout the Great Depression. While neighboring farms had folded under economic pressure, the Franklins had survived largely due to Joseph's ability to maintain and improve their equipment when new parts were unaffordable. His reputation had spread beyond the boundaries of their small community, with people bringing broken machinery from as far as Montgomery for his assessment. "Joseph Franklin can fix anything with baling wire and determination" had become a common refrain throughout the county. Little did he know that this same skill would soon be applied far from the peaceful fields of Alabama, in the war-torn landscapes of Europe. The draft notice arrived in December 1941, just days after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Despite being older than most draftees at 36, Joseph's physical fitness from years of farm labor made him an ideal candidate for service. Like many Black Americans entering the segregated military of the time, Joseph initially found himself assigned to support roles, serving in a quartermaster unit responsible for equipment maintenance. Colonel Thomas Richardson first encountered Joseph at a supply depot in Virginia in early 1942. The aging officer had stopped to observe a group of soldiers attempting to repair a damaged truck engine. After several mechanics had declared the vehicle beyond field repair, Joseph had requested permission to examine it. "With all due respect, sir, I believe I can get this running," Joseph told the colonel, who nodded his approval with obvious skepticism. Less than an hour later, the engine roared to life. When Richardson inquired about the repair, Joseph showed him a seemingly insignificant modification he had made using a common piece of wire that cost less than $1. "The vibration was causing the fuel line to come loose," Joseph explained. "This wire creates tension that keeps everything aligned properly, even under stress." Richardson studied the simple yet elegant solution. "That's remarkable ingenuity, Franklin. Where did you learn to do that?" "On our farm in Alabama, sir. When you can't afford new parts, you learn to make do with what you have." The colonel made a note in his small leather-bound notebook before continuing his inspection. 3 weeks later, Joseph received transfer orders to a specialized training facility in Maryland. Major David Hollister paced before the small group of men assembled in the briefing room. A career officer with extensive experience in North Africa, Hollister had been tasked with establishing a specialized marksmanship unit to counter the growing threat posed by German snipers. "Gentlemen, we are facing a significant disadvantage in the field," Hollister explained. "German Mauser rifles have an effective range advantage, of nearly 200 yards over our standard Springfield models. This has resulted in unacceptable casualties among our forward units. Joseph sat in the back row, still unsure why he had been transferred to this unit. He was a farmer and mechanic, not a marksman. Our weapons development teams are working on long-term solutions, Hollister continued, but we need immediate field modifications that can be implemented with existing equipment. That's where you come in. The major gestured toward a table covered with disassembled rifles. Each of you has been selected for your particular expertise. Some of you are championship marksmen, others are gunsmiths or engineers. Your collective assignment is to find ways to improve the performance of our standard-issue weapons. Over the following weeks, Joseph observed the others as they made various adjustments to the rifles, modifying sights, altering ammunition loads, and attempting to improve the barrels through various treatments. While these changes produced marginal improvements, none addressed the fundamental range limitation. One evening, as Joseph cleaned his assigned rifle, he noticed something about the way the barrel vibrated slightly during firing. It reminded him of the irrigation pipes on his farm, how even minor vibrations could significantly affect performance over distance. "May I try something, sir?" Joseph asked Sergeant Willis, the range officer overseeing their work. "Go ahead, Franklin," Willis replied, his tone suggesting he expected little from the attempt. Joseph disappeared into the workshop area and returned with several pieces of thin copper wire. With methodical precision, he began applying the wire at specific points along the barrel, creating a pattern of support that appeared haphazard to untrained eyes. "What exactly are you doing there, Franklin?" asked Lieutenant Cooper, one of the ballistics experts assigned to the program. "Harmonizing the barrel, sir," Joseph replied, without looking up from his work. "When this rifle fires, the barrel vibrates in a pattern. If you can control that pattern, you can improve accuracy at distance." Cooper exchanged skeptical glances with Willis, but allowed Joseph to continue. When the modification was complete, Joseph took the rifle to the firing range and prepared for a test shot. His first round hit the target dead center at 600 yards, a difficult but not exceptional shot. His second round struck the 800-yard target with similar precision. By his fifth shot, Joseph was consistently hitting targets at 1,000 yards, well beyond the rifle's standard effective range. Word of Joseph's modification spread quickly through the command structure. Within days, he was demonstrating the technique to senior officers, including General Marshall himself. The wire harmonization method, costing less than 75 cents per rifle, could be applied in the field with minimal training and immediately extended the effective range of American rifles by nearly 40%. By January 1943, Joseph found himself assigned to the 1st Infantry Division as they prepared for the Sicily campaign. His official role was to train snipers and marksmen in his modification technique, but as the division faced increasing pressure from German sharpshooters, Joseph was often called upon to demonstrate his skills firsthand. Captain Raymond Eaton, commander of Baker Company, watched through binoculars as Joseph prepared his position on the outskirts of San Fratello. The German advance had stalled at the river crossing, with their snipers effectively pinning down American forces attempting to establish a bridgehead. "You certain about this, Franklin?" Eaton asked, his voice betraying concern. "Their spotter teams have identified and eliminated every marksman we've positioned so far." Joseph nodded calmly as he made a final adjustment to his rifle. "The difference is that I can reach them before they can reach me, sir. My effective range is greater than theirs now." Eaton looked doubtful but had run out of options. "All right then, we need those snipers neutralized if we're going to advance before nightfall." "I understand, sir. Just need one thing." "What's that?" "Permission to teach Corporal Lewis here my wire technique. He's a natural shot and could cover the eastern approach while I focus on the western positions." Eaton glanced at Lewis, a young white soldier from Massachusetts who had been watching Joseph with undisguised admiration. "Can you do it quickly?" 20 minutes, sir. The basics, anyway." "Make it 15, Eaton replied, checking his watch. "The attack needs to begin at 1600 hours. Joseph worked efficiently, guiding Lewis through the precise placement of the wire segments along the barrel of his rifle. As he worked, he explained the theory behind the modification. Think of it like tuning a piano string, Joseph said. Every barrel has a natural frequency when it fires. This wire dampens certain vibrations and enhances others, making the barrel perform more consistently at distance. Lewis watched intently. Where did you learn this? Figured it out myself, Joseph replied. Been using similar techniques on farm equipment back home for years. Different application, same principle. With their rifles prepared, the two men took up positions 400 yards apart, creating interlocking fields of fire across the German positions. Over the next 3 hours, they systematically eliminated the German sniper threats, allowing American forces to advance and secure the bridgehead before dusk. That evening, as the company regrouped in the small Sicilian village they had captured, Eaton sought out Joseph. 8 confirmed enemy snipers neutralized, the captain said, offering Joseph a mug of coffee. Battalion commander couldn't believe the shooting distances reported. Joseph accepted the coffee with a nod. The technique works, sir. And Corporal Lewis picked it up quickly. He accounted for 3 of those confirmations. I want you to train the entire scout section tomorrow, Eaton said. If we can extend all their effective ranges, it would change our tactical approach entirely. Over the following weeks, as the Allied forces pushed across Sicily, Joseph's wire harmonization technique spread throughout the division. Reports of its effectiveness reached Supreme Allied headquarters, prompting formal integration into sniper training protocols. By the time the division prepared for the mainland Italy campaign, Joseph had been officially reassigned as the lead technical instructor for the newly formed long-range marksmanship unit, comprised of both black and white soldiers, an unusual arrangement for the still segregated military. Major General Terry Allen, commander of the 1st Infantry Division, requested a personal demonstration of Joseph's technique during a visit to the forward areas near Messina in August 1943. After observing Joseph consistently hit targets at ranges well beyond standard expectations, the general asked the question that many officers had pondered. Why wasn't this discovered by our weapons research team, Sergeant Franklin? Joseph considered the question carefully before answering. With respect, sir, I believe it's because they were looking for complex solutions to a complex problem. Sometimes the simplest approach works best, especially in field conditions. Allen nodded thoughtfully. There's a lesson in that for our entire command structure. Innovation can come from unexpected sources if we're willing to listen. As autumn approached and the Allied forces prepared for the challenging Italian campaign, Joseph found himself increasingly recognized for his contribution to the war effort. Letters of commendation arrived from senior commanders, and rumors circulated about potential decorations. Yet Joseph remained focused on his primary mission, training as many soldiers as possible in the technique that could save their lives. On a rain-soaked afternoon in late September, as thunder rolled across the Mediterranean, Joseph sat in a makeshift classroom instructing a new group of marksmen. Among them was Second Lieutenant Robert Williams, a recent West Point graduate assigned to observe the training program. The principle is straightforward, Joseph explained, holding up a length of the special copper wire he now received in dedicated supply shipments. But the application requires attention to detail. Every rifle has its own personality, its own pattern of vibration. You have to learn to feel it, to understand it. Williams raised his hand. With respect, Sergeant, that sounds more like folk wisdom than ballistic science. How can we standardize this technique if it's so individualistic? Joseph smiled patiently. Lieutenant, I understand your skepticism. The basic pattern works for all Springfield rifles, improving their performance significantly. But the fine-tuning, that extra 100 yards of effective range, comes from the marksman understanding his specific weapon. It's no different from how pilots come to know the particular behaviors of their aircraft. After the class, Williams approached Joseph privately. My apologies if I seem dismissive, Sergeant. It's just that at the academy we're taught to trust established principles and documented research. No offense taken, sir, Joseph replied. But if I may offer an observation, this war isn't being fought in textbooks. It's being fought in muddy fields and mountain passes by men who need practical solutions. Sometimes those solutions come from unexpected places. Williams nodded slowly. Like a farm in Alabama. Exactly, sir. The following morning, Joseph received orders transferring him to the newly formed joint British-American sniper training facility near Salerno. His technique, now officially designated the Franklin method of barrel harmonization, was to be incorporated into the Allied marksmanship curriculum. Before his departure, General Allen presented Joseph with the Bronze Star for his contribution to the war effort. The citation specifically mentioned how his innovation had saved numerous American lives by neutralizing enemy snipers who had previously operated beyond the reach of standard American rifles. "Your country is grateful, Sergeant Franklin," Allen said during the small ceremony. "Thank you, sir," Joseph replied, "though I must admit I never imagined my experience with fixing farm equipment would prove useful in this way." Allen smiled. "War makes strange demands of all of us. The ability to adapt, to see solutions where others see only problems. That's as valuable as any weapon in our arsenal." As Joseph prepared to leave Sicily for his new assignment, he received an unexpected visitor in his quarters. Colonel Richardson, the officer who had first noticed his mechanical aptitude back in Virginia, had arrived to personally deliver new orders. "Headquarters has expanded the scope of your program, Sergeant," Richardson explained, handing Joseph a sealed envelope. "Your wire harmonization technique has proven so effective that they want it implemented across multiple theaters. You're being sent to England first, then possibly to the Pacific Theater afterward." Joseph accepted the envelope with a mixture of pride and disbelief. "Sir, I'm honored, but I'm just a farmer who noticed something about vibrations." Richardson shook his head. "You're much more than that, Franklin. You're proof that innovation can come from anywhere, that wisdom isn't confined to laboratories or engineering schools. Your 75-cent wire modification is outperforming adjustments that cost thousands of dollars per rifle." As Joseph packed his few belongings, he came across a letter from his father that had arrived the previous week. Opening it again, he reread the simple message. "Your mother and I are proud of whatever you're doing over there, son. The neighbors keep asking when our famous wire wizard is coming home to fix their tractors again." The thought brought a smile to Joseph's face. How could he explain to his father that the same principles he had used to fix irrigation pipes on their modest Alabama farm were now being applied to rifles across the Allied forces? That generals and weapons experts were studying his simple technique with amazement. The transport plane to England was scheduled to depart the following morning. As Joseph settled into his bunk for his final night in Sicily, he reflected on the strange journey that had brought him from those dusty Alabama fields to the center of one of the war's most significant tactical innovations. Outside his window, the Mediterranean gleamed silver under a full moon. Somewhere beyond the horizon, German forces were preparing their defenses, unaware that their long-range advantage, one of their most significant tactical edges, had been neutralized by a simple wire costing less than $1, applied by a farmer who understood the fundamental nature of vibration and stability. Lieutenant James Porter found Joseph at the airfield early the next morning, clutching a telegram that had arrived during the night. "Change of plans, Sergeant," Porter announced, slightly out of breath from his rush to the field. "The demonstration in England has been postponed. You're needed urgently at the front lines near Salerno." "What happened?" Joseph asked, retrieving his duffel bag from the ground beside him. "German counter-offensive. They've brought in their Mountain Division snipers, some of their best. Our advance is stalled, and we're taking heavy casualties from marksmen we can't effectively engage." Porter paused, his expression grave. "General Clark specifically requested you by name. They need your expertise immediately." Within hours, Joseph found himself in a jeep racing toward the front lines, a crate of copper wire secured in the back seat. As they approached the mountains where American forces were engaged in fierce fighting, the distant sound of artillery echoed across the landscape. Captain Howard Miller greeted Joseph at the forward command post, a hastily established position in the basement of a damaged church. Maps covered the tables, and radio operators maintained constant communication with units spread across the mountainous terrain. "Glad you're here, Sergeant Franklin," Miller said, leading Joseph to the main operations map. "We've got a situation that seems tailor-made for your expertise." Miller pointed to several marked positions along a ridgeline. "German snipers have established positions here, here, and here. They're operating at ranges between 800 and 1,000 yards, effectively pinning down our advance along the main road to Avellino. Standard counter-sniper tactics have proven ineffective due to the extreme distances involved. Joseph studied the map carefully. What do we know about their equipment? Intelligence suggests they're using the new Mauser 98K rifles with telescopic sights, possibly with some custom modifications. They're hitting targets consistently at ranges our marksmen can't match with standard equipment. Joseph nodded thoughtfully. How many men do you have with advanced marksmanship training? 8 that I would consider expert-level shooters, though none have been trained in your wire harmonization technique. That's enough to work with, Joseph replied. I'll need a secure location to modify their rifles and a few hours to train them on the fundamentals. Miller led Joseph to a stone farmhouse that had been converted into a temporary armory. Will this work? Joseph surveyed the space with a professional eye. This will do fine, sir. Please have your marksmen report here with their rifles within the hour, and I'll need a good spotter with experience in mountain operations. I know just the man, Miller said. Sergeant Lorenzo Delgado. He grew up hunting in the Colorado Rockies. Best eyes in the battalion. As the afternoon progressed, Joseph worked methodically with each marksman, applying his wire technique to their rifles and instructing them in the proper maintenance and adjustment procedures. By evening, he had assembled what Miller jokingly referred to as Franklin's Wire Brigade. 8 marksmen and 4 spotters prepared to counter the German snipers at their own game. The plan called for deployment before dawn, allowing Joseph and his team to establish positions while darkness still provided cover. As they prepared their equipment, Sergeant Delgado approached Joseph with a question that many had pondered, but few had asked directly. With respect, Sergeant Franklin, Delgado began hesitantly, I'm curious about something. You developed this technique that's changing how we fight, saving countless lives. Yet back home, I couldn't sit at the same lunch counter as you in many states. Joseph finished the thought. The irony isn't lost on me, Sergeant Delgado. Delgado looked embarrassed. I didn't mean to. It's a fair observation, Joseph interrupted gently. I'm fighting for a country that doesn't always fight for me. But I believe in what America can be, not just what it is now. And every man whose life is saved by this technique, regardless of his color, is a victory for that future. Delgado nodded slowly. Well, for what it's worth, it's an honor to serve alongside you, Sergeant Franklin. Likewise, Joseph replied, returning his attention to the maps spread before them. Now about these German positions, I think we need to approach from the eastern slope. The morning sun will be at our backs, giving us a significant advantage in visibility. As darkness fell across the Italian countryside, Joseph and his team moved silently through olive groves and vineyards toward their designated positions. The weight of expectation rested heavily on their shoulders. If they succeeded, the American advance could resume with significantly reduced casualties. If they failed, more men would die under the precise fire of German marksmen who believed themselves safely beyond the reach of American rifles. Joseph settled into position as the first hints of dawn colored the eastern sky. Through his scope, he studied the distant ridgeline where intelligence had placed the German sniper teams. Though still too dark to discern details, he could make out the general outlines of potential positions, natural rock formations and abandoned farm buildings that would provide ideal vantage points. Beside him, Sergeant Delgado scanned the same area through high-powered binoculars. Nothing moving yet, he whispered, but they're there, I can feel it. Joseph made a minor adjustment to his scope. They'll reveal themselves once the action starts. Their job is to protect those machine gun emplacements covering the road. When our forces begin their advance, the snipers will focus on officers and radio operators. So we wait, Delgado confirmed. We wait, Joseph agreed, his voice betraying no impatience despite the tension of the moment. Farming taught me that too. Sometimes the most important part of the work is knowing when to be still. As the sun crept higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the valley below, Joseph's thoughts drifted momentarily to his home in Alabama. He wondered if the autumn harvest had been good this year, if his father had managed to fix the temperamental tractor that had been giving them trouble for months. It seemed a lifetime ago now, that peaceful existence among the cotton fields and vegetable gardens. The distant sound of artillery fire brought his focus sharply back to the present. The American advance was beginning right on schedule. Now would come the true test of his innovation, not on training ranges or in demonstrations for generals, but in direct competition with Germany's finest marksmen. Beside him, Delgado tensed suddenly. Movement! Stone farmhouse with the collapsed roof, second-floor window. Joseph shifted his aim smoothly, finding the position in his scope. A glint of light, sunlight reflecting off glass, confirmed the presence of an enemy observer or sniper. Range, Joseph asked quietly. 920 yards, Delgado replied after consulting his range-finding equipment. Joseph made a slight adjustment to his scope. Wind? Light breeze from the northwest, maybe 5 miles per hour. With practiced precision, Joseph accounted for distance, wind, and the slight downward angle of the shot. His finger rested lightly on the trigger as he exhaled slowly, his heartbeat steady and controlled. The rifle cracked, its report echoing across the valley. Through his scope, Joseph watched as the German spotter fell backward from view. A perfect shot at a range that just months earlier would have been considered beyond the reliable capability of American marksmen. "Target down," Delgado confirmed. "My God, what a shot!" But Joseph was already shifting his position, scanning for the sniper who would inevitably be paired with the spotter he had just neutralized. "They work in teams just like us. The shooter will be nearby, probably." "There," Delgado interrupted, pointing toward a cluster of boulders 30 yards to the left of the farmhouse. "Partial view of a rifle barrel." Joseph located the position quickly. "Good eyes, Sergeant. Range 900 yards even." This shot would be more challenging. Only a portion of the target was visible, and the German sniper, now aware of the threat, would be preparing to relocate. It was a fleeting opportunity that would not come again. Joseph squeezed the trigger at the precise moment between heartbeats, as he had taught his trainees to do. The rifle bucked against his shoulder, its harmonized barrel delivering the round with unprecedented accuracy across the vast distance. "Direct hit," Delgado reported with quiet amazement. "That's 2. Across the valley, similar scenes were unfolding as Joseph's hastily trained team engaged the German snipers who had been tormenting American forces for days. By mid-morning, the situation had dramatically reversed. German marksmen, accustomed to operating with impunity beyond the effective range of standard American rifles, found themselves vulnerable to precise fire from previously unthreatening distances. Captain Miller's voice crackled over the radio shortly before noon. "Franklin, this is Miller. Status report." Joseph keyed the handset. 7 confirmed enemy marksmen neutralized, 3 probable. We're maintaining position and continuing to provide overwatch for the advance. There was a moment of static-filled silence before Miller responded. "Outstanding work, Sergeant. The road is clear to the outskirts of Avellino now. The Germans are falling back to their secondary positions." "Any casualties among our forward elements?" "Minimal," Miller replied, a note of disbelief evident even through the distortion of the radio. They never knew what hit them. As the sun reached its zenith, Joseph allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. His simple innovation, born from years of practical problem-solving on an Alabama farm, had proven decisive in a critical military engagement. The 75-cent wire that had once stabilized irrigation pipes was now saving American lives on the battlefields of Europe. Delgado offered Joseph his canteen. "You know, after today, they're going to want your wire technique implemented across the entire Allied forces." Joseph took a long drink of water before responding. "That was always the plan. The more men who know this method, the more lives we save." "You could have patented this after the war. Made a fortune," Delgado observed. Joseph shook his head. "Some knowledge belongs to everyone. My father taught me that." As October 1943 gave way to November, Joseph Franklin found himself summoned to Allied Force Headquarters in Algiers. The success of his wire harmonization technique in the Salerno campaign had attracted attention at the highest levels of command. General Eisenhower himself had requested a comprehensive briefing on what was now being called the Franklin Method. Joseph stood nervously outside the conference room, his uniform pressed to perfection. Despite the recognition his innovation had received, he remained acutely aware of his status as a black soldier in a segregated military. Even with a Bronze Star and numerous commendations, he was still sometimes mistaken for support staff rather than the inventor of a battlefield-changing technique. Colonel Richardson approached, offering a reassuring nod. "Ready for this, Sergeant?" "As ready as I'll ever be, sir," Joseph replied, adjusting his tie one final time. "Just explain it like you would to one of your trainees. These men may have stars on their shoulders, but they need to understand this technique as clearly as any rifleman in the field." Inside, Joseph found himself facing a room full of senior officers from multiple Allied nations. General Eisenhower sat at the center of the table, flanked by British, French, and American commanders. The atmosphere was formal, but not unwelcoming, with all eyes focused intently on Joseph as he was introduced. "Gentlemen, this is Staff Sergeant Joseph Franklin," Richardson announced, "creator of the barrel harmonization method that has proven so effective against German long-range marksmen." Eisenhower gestured toward an empty chair. "Please be seated, Sergeant. We're eager to hear directly from you about this innovation." For the next hour, Joseph explained the principles behind his technique, demonstrating with a rifle and several lengths of his specialized wire. He described how the precise placement of wire segments along the barrel created a pattern of controlled vibration that significantly improved accuracy at extreme distances. "The principle is similar to stringed instruments," Joseph explained. "Just as a violin string must be properly tensioned to produce the correct note, a rifle barrel must vibrate in a consistent pattern to deliver accurate fire. The wire creates a consistent harmonization effect." General Walter Bedell Smith, Eisenhower's chief of staff, leaned forward with interest. "And this can be applied to any rifle, not just American models?" "Yes, sir," Joseph confirmed. "I've successfully applied the technique to British Enfields and captured German Mausers as well. The principle remains consistent, though the specific wire placement pattern needs adjustment for different weapons." A British general whose name Joseph didn't catch asked, "What prevents the enemy from simply copying this method once they observe it in the field?" Joseph considered the question carefully. "Nothing in principle, sir, but the technique requires both understanding of the underlying mechanical principles and considerable practice to implement effectively. It's not something easily reverse-engineered from a captured rifle, as the wire pattern itself looks deceptively simple. The true complexity lies in knowing exactly where and how to apply the tension." As the briefing concluded, Eisenhower addressed Joseph directly. "Sergeant Franklin, your contribution may well save thousands of Allied lives before this war is over. I'm authorizing immediate implementation of your technique across all theaters of operation, with you as the lead technical advisor for the training program." "Thank you, sir," Joseph replied, overwhelmed by the significance of the moment. "I'm honored to serve in whatever capacity is most useful." "One more thing," Eisenhower added. "I understand this innovation came from your experience as a farmer. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir. Specifically from techniques I developed to stabilize irrigation systems on our family farm in Alabama." Eisenhower nodded thoughtfully. "A reminder to us all that innovation can come from unexpected sources. We would do well to remember that lesson beyond this war." As Joseph left the conference room, Richardson fell into step beside him. "Congratulations, Sergeant. Not many men get a personal commendation from the Supreme Allied Commander." "Still trying to take it all in, sir," Joseph admitted. "When I was drafted, I never imagined anything like this." "Your new orders will come through officially tomorrow," Richardson continued. "But I can tell you now that you're being promoted to Technical Sergeant and assigned to establish training programs at key locations throughout the Mediterranean and European theaters." The promotion meant more responsibility and a modest increase in pay. But Joseph found himself thinking primarily of the expanded opportunity to implement his technique more widely. Every trained marksman potentially represented lives saved, both the marksman himself and the fellow soldiers he could protect. By December 1943, Joseph had established his primary training facility near Naples, with satellite programs operating in North Africa, Sicily, and preparations underway for centers in England, to support the upcoming cross-channel invasion. The wire wizards, as graduates of Joseph's program came to be known, were in high demand across all Allied units, their specialized skills providing a critical counter to German sniping operations. Captain Lewis Davidson, a former hunting guide from Montana, who now commanded a specialized counter-sniper unit, sought Joseph out during a training visit to Naples. "Your method has completely changed the equation in our sector," Davidson told him over coffee in the officers' mess. "Last month we eliminated 23 enemy marksmen at ranges they clearly believed were safe. Intelligence reports suggest they're adjusting their tactics as a result, pulling their snipers back to even greater distances or redirecting them to sectors where they haven't encountered our wire-modified rifles." Joseph nodded, having heard similar reports from multiple fronts. "They're adapting, which means we need to stay ahead of them. I'm working on refinements to the technique for even greater ranges." "That's actually what I wanted to discuss," Davidson said, lowering his voice slightly. "We captured documents from a German officer last week, training manuals for their sniper school near Munich. They're developing their own barrel harmonization methods." Joseph wasn't surprised. It was inevitable they'd work on countermeasures once they understood what they were facing. "Have they made progress?" "Some, but their approach is more complex and less effective than yours. They're trying to achieve the same result through mechanical adjustments to the rifle itself, rather than your external wire method. More costly, less field adaptable. Which gives us an advantage in flexibility," Joseph concluded. "My wire technique can be adjusted quickly as conditions change. Their mechanical modifications would be fixed once implemented." Davidson nodded. "Exactly. But there's something else you should know. The document specifically referenced the Franklin method by name. They're aware of you personally." The news sent an unexpected chill through Joseph. The idea that his name was known to German intelligence seemed surreal, a farm boy from Alabama being discussed in enemy military circles. "Is that unusual?" Joseph asked. "For an enlisted man?" "Very," Davidson confirmed. "They typically track officers and unit designations, not individual sergeants. But your impact has been significant enough to attract specific attention. In January 1944, as Allied forces fought through the difficult Italian winter toward Monte Cassino, Joseph received an unusual visitor at his Naples training facility. Major Wilhelm Hoffmann, a Swiss observer authorized to monitor certain aspects of the conflict on behalf of the International Committee of the Red Cross, arrived with proper credentials and a letter of introduction from Allied headquarters. "Sergeant Franklin," Hoffmann began after the formal introductions had been completed, his English excellent but colored by a German-Swiss accent. "I have been authorized to discuss certain technical matters with you regarding long-range marksmanship techniques." Joseph regarded the visitor with cautious professionalism. "What specifically are you interested in, Major?" "To be direct, your wire harmonization method has attracted attention beyond military circles. The scientific community is quite interested in the principles involved, which appear to contradict certain established ballistic theories." Joseph had encountered this skepticism before from academically trained weapons designers. "The principles are sound, sir, even if they weren't developed in a laboratory." "Precisely why I am here," Hoffmann replied with unexpected enthusiasm. "Innovation often comes from practical application rather than theory. Would you be willing to demonstrate the technique?" After receiving clearance from his commanding officer, Joseph provided Hoffmann with a basic demonstration of the wire method, careful to omit certain critical details that remained classified. As the demonstration concluded, Hoffmann made an observation that caught Joseph by surprise. "You know, Sergeant, there are manufacturers in Switzerland who have been attempting to achieve similar accuracy improvements for sporting rifles for years, with limited success. After the war, your technique could have significant commercial applications." The thought hadn't occurred to Joseph. "I hadn't considered that, sir. My focus has been entirely on its military application." "But you would be entitled to patent protection," Hoffmann persisted. "This represents a genuine innovation that could be quite valuable in civilian markets." Joseph considered this briefly before shaking his head. "This technique was developed while in service to my country. If it has value beyond the war, then that value belongs to the nation, not to me personally." Hoffman studied Joseph with newfound respect. "A commendable position, Sergeant, though I suspect many men would view it differently." "Many might," Joseph acknowledged. "But where I come from, we understand that some knowledge belongs to the community. Like seed stock or water rights, some things have greater value when shared than when hoarded." As preparations for Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion of France, intensified in the spring of 1944, Joseph found himself transferred to England to establish training programs for units designated for the initial landings. The strategic importance of counter-sniper operations had been emphasized in the invasion planning, with German defensive preparations known to include extensive positions for marksmen covering the likely landing beaches. Colonel James Montgomery, responsible for special operations training for the invasion force, incorporated Joseph's program as a mandatory element for designated marksmen in each assault company. "Your wire wizards will be among the first specialized personnel to land after the initial waves," Montgomery explained during a planning session at the training facility in Devonshire. "Their primary mission will be to neutralize German observation posts and sniper positions overlooking the beaches." Joseph studied the detailed relief maps of the Normandy coastline. "The terrain presents challenges, sir. Those bluffs provide ideal positions for enemy marksmen, with commanding views of the approach areas." "Precisely why your long-range capability is so critical," Montgomery agreed. "Standard rifle ranges would leave our forces vulnerable during the crucial phase between landing and establishing beachheads. Your wire-modified rifles provide the extended reach we need to counter their positional advantage." Throughout April and May, Joseph worked relentlessly to train as many marksmen as possible in his technique. The pressure was immense. Every soldier he trained represented potential lives saved during the landing operations. He drove himself and his instructors to exhaustion, often working 18-hour days to maximize the number of properly trained marksmen available for the invasion. Captain Thomas Winthrop, one of Joseph's most dedicated instructors, found him still working at 3 in the morning just days before they were scheduled to depart for their staging area near Portsmouth. "You need rest, Sergeant," Winthrop said, concerned by the exhaustion evident in Joseph's face. "You cannot effectively train men if you collapse." Joseph rubbed his tired eyes. "Every man we fail to train properly is a potential casualty, Captain. I can rest after they land." "And if you're too exhausted to make proper assessments, what good does that serve?" Winthrop countered. "The technique is spreading. Your instructors are training other instructors. The system is working. You've built something that will continue even when you're not personally overseeing every aspect." Joseph knew Winthrop was right, but the weight of responsibility was difficult to set aside. "I keep thinking about the men who will be on those beaches, facing fire from positions they can't even see clearly. Which is precisely why the work you've already done matters so much," Winthrop said. "Your innovation has already changed the equation. Now trust the men you've trained to implement it properly." As D-Day approached, Joseph received unexpected new orders. Rather than remaining in England as the training program supervisor, he was being attached to a specialized ranger unit, tasked with neutralizing key German observation posts on the cliffs overlooking Omaha Beach. His personal expertise would be deployed directly in one of the most critical sectors of the invasion. The night before they were to embark, Joseph wrote what might be his final letter home to his parents in Alabama. He couldn't share details of the coming operation, but he wanted to ensure they understood the significance of what their support had made possible. "The skills you and Mother taught me, patience, careful observation, understanding the natural world, have proven more valuable than I could have imagined," he wrote. "What began with fixing irrigation pipes on our farm has evolved into something that commanders believe will save many lives in the days ahead. Whatever happens tomorrow and in the days that follow, please know that the lessons learned under your guidance have mattered deeply." Before sealing the envelope, Joseph added one final thought. "The wire that cost 75 cents at Johnston's Hardware has traveled farther than either of us might have dreamed." Dawn on June 6, 1944, found Joseph in a landing craft approaching the Normandy coast, the specialized ranger unit crowded around him, tense with anticipation. The sound of naval gunfire thundered overhead, and through breaks in the smoke, they could glimpse the imposing cliffs that were their objective. Captain Robert Miller, the Ranger Company commander, gathered his team leaders for a final briefing as their landing craft maneuvered through the choppy waters. "Primary targets remain the observation posts identified here and here," Miller said, pointing to marked positions on his waterproof map. "Intelligence indicates at least 2 designated sniper teams at each location, with interlocking fields of fire covering the entire beach approach." Joseph checked his modified rifle one final time. "What's the estimated range to those positions from our landing point?" "Between 800 and 1,000 yards to the nearest positions," Miller replied, with elevated firing angles increasing effective distance. Joseph nodded grimly. Standard rifles would be essentially ineffective against targets at such ranges, particularly given the challenging upward angles involved. This was precisely the scenario his wire harmonization technique had been designed to address. As their landing craft approached the beach, the full chaos of the invasion came into view. Earlier landing waves were pinned down by fire from multiple positions, with the planned advance stalled at the water's edge in many sectors. "Change of plans," Miller announced as they observed the situation. "We're diverting to that seawall position where Charlie Company has established a temporary foothold. We'll set up initial counter-sniper operations from there before attempting to advance up the bluffs." Joseph felt the landing craft lurch as it changed course, heading toward a section of beach where a group of soldiers had managed to reach a low seawall, providing minimal cover. As they approached, geysers of water erupted around them as enemy fire targeted the incoming craft. The jarring impact as they hit the beach sent men stumbling against each other. "Move! Move! Move!" Miller shouted above the cacophony of battle, urging his men toward the relative safety of the seawall. Joseph splashed through the shallow water, his rifle held high to keep it dry, acutely aware of the rounds impacting around them. The 70 yards to the seawall felt like miles, each step an exercise in controlled terror. 2 men fell during the dash, but the remainder of the unit reached the temporary haven of the seawall intact. "Establish firing positions here," Miller ordered, gesturing along the wall. "Franklin, identify those sniper nests. Priority targets are positions with clear fields of fire on the beach access points." Joseph set up his observation equipment, methodically scanning the cliffs and buildings visible at the top of the bluffs. Despite the smoke and chaos, his trained eye quickly identified several likely positions based on terrain features and defensive construction. 4 confirmed positions, he reported to Miller after several minutes of observation. 2 in the stone buildings at the cliff edge, 1 in what appears to be a church steeple in the village, and 1 in a camouflaged position among the trees to the east. Miller nodded. "Ranges. Nearest is approximately 850 yards. Furthest is just over 1,100. Well beyond standard effective range," Miller observed grimly. "But within range of our modified rifles," Joseph countered. "I need 4 of our best shots distributed along this position with clear firing lanes." As Joseph's team established their firing positions, he provided final guidance to each marksman. "Remember your training. Account for the upward angle in your calculations. The wire harmonization will maintain accuracy at these distances, but you still need to compensate properly for elevation and wind." Sergeant Paul Williams, a former competitive marksman from Pennsylvania, was assigned the most distant target. "That's well beyond what I've ever attempted in combat conditions," he admitted, as Joseph helped him adjust his scope. "The principle remains the same regardless of distance," Joseph assured him. "Trust the harmonization. Feel the rifle's natural rhythm. The wire is doing exactly what it was designed to do, just like on the training range." One by one, Joseph's team of specialized marksmen began engaging the German positions that had been terrorizing the landing forces. The distinctive crack of their rifles stood out even amid the general chaos of the invasion, each shot representing the culmination of months of training and preparation. Through his spotting scope, Joseph observed as Williams took his first shot at the distant church steeple position. The round found its mark with remarkable precision, neutralizing a sniper who had believed himself safely beyond the reach of American rifles. Similar successes followed as other team members engaged their assigned targets. By mid-morning, the effectiveness of Joseph's wire wizards had dramatically altered the situation in their sector. German marksmen, no longer able to operate with impunity from their elevated positions, were forced to withdraw to more distant locations or abandon their posts entirely. This created crucial openings that allowed assault teams to begin advancing up the bluffs. Captain Miller approached Joseph at his observation post, his expression a mixture of amazement and grim satisfaction. HQ reports similar results across multiple sectors. The German sniper advantage has been neutralized more effectively than anyone dared hope. Your wire method is proving its worth in the most critical test imaginable. As the day progressed, Joseph's team continued to provide crucial support for the advancing forces. By evening, as the beachhead was finally secured and reinforcements poured ashore, the true impact of the wire harmonization technique became apparent in the after-action reports. Units with trained wire wizards had suffered significantly fewer casualties from sniper fire than those without such support. General Omar Bradley visited their position the following day as part of his inspection of the expanding beachhead. After receiving a briefing on the counter-sniper operations, he specifically requested to meet the creator of the technique that had proven so effective. Joseph stood at attention as Bradley approached, keenly aware of the historic significance of the moment. "Sergeant Franklin," Bradley began, his voice carrying the weight of command yet tinged with genuine appreciation, "I've reviewed the preliminary reports from yesterday's operations. The effectiveness of your wire harmonization method appears to have been a significant factor in our success, particularly in the early phases when our forces were most vulnerable." "Thank you, sir," Joseph replied simply. "The credit belongs to the marksmen who implemented the technique under extremely challenging conditions." Bradley shook his head slightly. "Don't diminish your contribution, Sergeant. Innovation that saves lives deserves full recognition." He paused, studying Joseph thoughtfully. "I understand this technique originated from your experience as a farmer." "Yes, sir. Specifically from methods I developed to stabilize irrigation systems on my family's farm in Alabama." "Remarkable," Bradley commented. "A reminder that valuable insights can come from unexpected sources." He extended his hand. "On behalf of the men whose lives your innovation has saved, thank you." The handshake, a simple gesture yet profound in its significance, represented more than just recognition of Joseph's contribution. It acknowledged that expertise and innovation could emerge from any background, that the value of an idea transcended the social limitations often imposed on its creator. As the Allied forces pushed inland from the Normandy beaches in the days and weeks that followed, Joseph's role evolved. He divided his time between field operations with advanced counter-sniper units and establishing training centers to expand the implementation of his technique. The demand for wire wizards grew exponentially as their effectiveness became widely recognized across all combat sectors. In August 1944, as Allied forces liberated Paris and continued their advance toward Germany, Joseph received orders to return temporarily to the United States. The War Department had decided to incorporate his wire harmonization method into the standard training curriculum for all American sniper and designated marksman programs. As the originator of the technique, Joseph was needed to help establish the foundational training protocols. His return to American soil was understated. No parades or public recognition, just a military transport flight to Washington and a quiet check-in at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, where the new training program would be headquartered. Yet within military circles, Joseph's reputation had grown enormously. Senior officers who would never normally acknowledge an enlisted man now sought his input on marksmanship doctrine and equipment specifications. Lieutenant Colonel Richard Harrison, the officer overseeing the implementation of the new training program, welcomed Joseph with unexpected warmth. "Your reputation precedes you, Sergeant Franklin," Harrison said as they toured the partially completed training facility. "There are generals who consider your wire harmonization method among the most significant tactical innovations of this war." Joseph, never entirely comfortable with such praise, deflected as he typically did. "It's a simple solution to a straightforward problem, sir. I was fortunate that my background gave me a different perspective on barrel harmonics. And therein lies the lesson for our entire command structure," Harrison observed. "The most elegant solutions often come from thinking beyond conventional boundaries. Your 75-cent wire outperformed modifications costing thousands of dollars per rifle. During his 3-month assignment in the United States, Joseph was granted a brief leave to visit his family in Alabama. The reunion with his parents was emotional. 2 years had passed since his deployment, years filled with uncertainty and worry on both sides. His father, now stooped with age but still sharp-minded, marveled at the journey his son's innovation had taken. "To think it all started with fixing those irrigation pipes," William said, as they sat on the porch of the family home. "Never would have imagined it." "The principle was the same," Joseph explained. "Understanding how vibration affects performance, whether it's water through a pipe or a bullet through a barrel." "Always knew you had a gift for seeing how things work," his father replied proudly. "Just never imagined it would take you across an ocean and into a war." Joseph's mother, Martha, had remained largely silent during these discussions, perhaps overwhelmed by the presence of a son she had feared might never return. But as evening approached and Joseph prepared to help with the evening chores, falling naturally back into the rhythms of farm life, she finally spoke her mind. "They treating you right over there?" she asked quietly when they were alone in the kitchen. "With respect like you deserve." Joseph considered the question carefully, knowing his mother would detect any attempt to sugarcoat the reality. "It's complicated, Mama. My work is respected, valued even, but the uniform doesn't change the color of my skin or what that means to some people." Martha nodded, having expected nothing less. "And this special wire technique of yours, they're giving you proper credit for that?" "Yes," Joseph said with certainty. "Whatever else might be true, they've been fair about acknowledging where it came from. My name is attached to it officially." His mother seemed satisfied with this answer. "Your father tells everyone who'll listen that his son's invention is helping win the war. Got Mr. Johnston at the hardware store saying he supplied the original wire that started it all." Joseph smiled at this. In a way, he did. In December 1944, Joseph returned to Europe, now holding the rank of Master Sergeant and serving as the technical advisor for all Allied barrel harmonization programs. The war had entered its final, desperate phase, with German forces increasingly relying on specialized units of elite marksmen to slow the Allied advance toward their homeland. Major General Maxwell Taylor specifically requested Joseph's expertise during the planning for counter-sniper operations in the Ardennes region, where intelligence had identified the deployment of several units from the German sniper training school at Zossen. "These are their best marksmen," Taylor explained during the briefing, many with more than 100 confirmed kills on the Eastern Front. "They've been specifically tasked with targeting our officer corps and disrupting our command structure." Joseph studied the terrain maps of the densely forested region. "The environment favors their approach: limited visibility, plenty of concealment, difficult ranging conditions. Our wire wizards will need specialized training for woodland counter-sniper operations." "You have 2 weeks to prepare them," Taylor replied. "After that, we expect significant engagement throughout this sector." What followed was the most intensive training program Joseph had yet developed, focusing on the unique challenges of detecting and neutralizing snipers in forested terrain. He worked closely with forest rangers and professional hunters who had been drafted into service, combining their woodland expertise with his technical knowledge of long-range accuracy. When the German offensive in the Ardennes, later known as the Battle of the Bulge, began on December 16th, Joseph's specialized counter-sniper units were among the few American elements that proved immediately effective against the surprise attack. While other units struggled with the sudden onslaught, the wire wizards successfully neutralized many of the German marksmen who had been tasked with eliminating American leadership. General Taylor later credited this effort with preserving key elements of the command structure during the critical early phase of the battle. "Franklin's wire wizards kept our communication and leadership intact when it mattered most," he noted in his after-action report. "The psychological impact was equally significant. Knowing we could effectively counter their best marksmen at their own game boosted morale across the entire front." As the Allied forces pushed into Germany in the final months of the war, Joseph's wire harmonization technique remained a critical element of their tactical approach. German snipers, once among the most feared threats on the battlefield, had been systematically neutralized by marksmen using Joseph's method. In April 1945, as American forces liberated Zossen and captured the German sniper training facility intact, Joseph was brought in to examine the documents and equipment found there. Among the materials was a complete technical analysis of his wire harmonization method, along with German attempts to develop countermeasures and their own version of the technique. They never quite figured it out, observed Colonel Richardson, who had accompanied Joseph to the facility. Their engineers overthought the problem, trying to develop a mechanical solution when your approach was elegantly simple. Joseph examined the German prototypes with professional interest. They were on the right track with some of these designs. Another 6 months and they might have matched our capability. But they didn't have those 6 months, Richardson noted, partly thanks to you. As victory in Europe became imminent, Joseph received new orders. He was being transferred to the Pacific Theater to implement his wire harmonization technique in the difficult jungle and island environments where Allied forces continued to face Japanese resistance. Before his departure, however, he received an unexpected honor. The Army Ordnance Department officially designated the wire harmonization method as Franklin Barrel Stabilization Type A in their technical manuals, ensuring that his name would be permanently associated with the innovation that had changed modern marksmanship. At the small ceremony marking this designation, General George Patton himself made an appearance, having heard about the technique that had proven so effective against German snipers in multiple campaigns. "Innovation wins wars as surely as courage does," Patton remarked after being introduced to Joseph. "Your contribution will likely outlast the conflict itself." Joseph's journey from Alabama farmer to military innovator represented more than just a personal achievement. It stood as testament to the principle that expertise and insight could emerge from any background, that formal education and established credentials were not the only paths to significant innovation. The 75-cent wire that had once stabilized irrigation pipes on a modest farm had traveled across oceans, saved countless lives, and ultimately helped change the course of military tactical doctrine. Yet Joseph himself remained fundamentally unchanged, still the thoughtful problem solver, who believed that understanding how things worked was the first step toward improving them. As the war in Europe concluded in May 1945, Joseph boarded a transport plane bound for the Pacific, carrying with him spools of the specialized wire that had become his unexpected legacy. The journey ahead would present new challenges and environments for his technique, but the underlying principle remained constant. Simple solutions often proved most effective when applied with thorough understanding and careful attention to detail. Years later, long after the guns had fallen silent and Joseph had returned to civilian life, military academies around the world would still teach the Franklin method of barrel harmonization as a foundational element of advanced marksmanship training. The technique would evolve with new materials and applications, but its core principle, born on an Alabama farm from the need to stabilize vibrating irrigation pipes, would remain unchanged. In 1953, when interviewed for a military history publication about his innovation, Joseph was asked if he had ever imagined the impact his simple wire technique would have. "No one can predict how far an idea might travel," he replied thoughtfully. "I was just trying to solve the problem in front of me with the knowledge I had. The fact that it proved useful beyond my own circumstances is a reminder that we all have something valuable to contribute, often in ways we never anticipated." The 75-cent wire that had outranged Germany's best snipers had indeed traveled far from its humble origins, a journey that reflected not just one man's ingenuity, but the broader truth that innovation recognizes no boundaries of background, formal education, or social standing. It emerges wherever there are problems to be solved and minds open enough to approach them from fresh perspectives. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.